Alright, let's get the obvious out of the way straight away, shall we? We all know that Nintendo are charging far too much for these two games in, well, 2025. So we all agree on that. Let's move on and see what they offer on Nintendo Switch 1 and 2. If they are worth playing in this way, if it is indeed better than the original way of playing, things like motion controls, how does that respond on Switch with its noticeably different architecture? And of course, visual performance on Switch 1, Switch 2, and performance in general, as well as any changes that they've made since Mario Galaxy 1 was released on the 3D All-Stars bundle. If you enjoy the content, let me know down below. As always, thanks for watching. Is it indeed, as Polygon alluded to, two great games for the price of two? Or is there more than meets the eye? Well, my name's Mark Walker. Welcome back to SwitchUp. Now let's find out. Let's start with the first game. Straight away you'll notice an assist mode that will help newer players, especially younger children, to enjoy the experience, affecting things like difficulty and the overall ease of control. And also from that main screen you'll see the music player where you can play all of your favourite tracks, and of course the actual resolution and presentation of these UI screens has been up-resed and upscaled to meet your preferred platform. Now most of my time has been on Switch 2, but I will also show you some Switch 1 footage in here as well. And in the control options you can have the original controls or you can have modern controls, which only changes the inverse nature of the XY axis. There's nothing major there. So how exactly does it control then? Well, you would use the left joycon as essentially the nunchuck and the right one as the pointer. As we know, the original Wii had a pointer system that was proper, that's how it had such good light gun games, because it was accurately tracked. The Switch doesn't have that. It uses gyroscope sensors, a little bit of trickery to try and work out where you're pointing, and that can very often lead to some real drift. So as you're watching my footage, try and see where my hand is as related to the cursor on the screen. You can of course correct this. You can press a button to fix it and bring it back to the center, but it will never feel as good as a classic Wiimote or anything that uses an actual sensor bar. With that said, at 60 frames per second, native resolution, and if you've got a good TV, it does feel really responsive, but invariably I did have to reset quite often as I gradually drifted off center. Now, another interesting area is the ability to play co-op. I'm going to try and show you this using the camera footage so you can see the position of my hands related to what's on screen. To do co-op, you just go into the menu. You can do that at any point. Press those really annoying tiny buttons on the back of your Joy-Con, then hold down the SLSR buttons. And this is a little bit weird, I have to say. So you have to hold them not pointed like you feel you should. You actually hold them like a controller, like you would in something like Mario Kart, and then you'd be aiming using what would be the center of the Joy-Con. It does feel a little strange. Now once again you can press a button to bring back the center point and realign things, but it's not the most natural way of holding it for me, and perhaps there's an option to change that. I didn't see it, but it does once again work well enough, but in a similar story it will gradually drift away. Now as far as gameplay, that second player doesn't obviously directly control Mario. This is very familiar if you've played Mario Odyssey in co-op. The second player can stop enemies. They can also collect items, so they are of some use, just limited in comparison to Mario. However, in the controls section, you can see that the second player also can assist with some of the more advanced moves, things like the super jump, which takes me on to general motion controls. Now, I've mentioned you can point with the right Joy-Con. There are also flick actions, so you can flick the right Joy-Con to do Mario's spin move. You can also do that when he's jumping in the air after something like a triple jump to go a little further. So this is one of the weird situations where we have a re-release of a game that's already in another pack with the All-Stars pack as mentioned. What are the differences there then between the two? Well, as far as I understand it from Glen, the version that you were presented with in that pack was very much a simple port. So it had the same content. Visually, it obviously looked exactly like the original with widescreen support, but controls-wise, a similar story really. Joy-Con to aim. However, the big one I think for a lot of people, especially people that have Switch Lites or the original Switch or can only play in handheld for some other reason, is that now with these versions you actually still have gyro in handheld mode. That is a big deal because I think, if I'm not mistaken, yeah, you were touching the screen to do the motion. You don't have to do that anymore. Having said that, things like the flick actions you won't be doing in handheld, probably because they don't want people to launch their Switch across the room when the magnets come loose. At least from my testing, I couldn't get those to still work. You'd have to do those with a button push. But yes, you do have proper gyro, in handheld mode now. But thankfully that isn't all, because there are some extras that they've added in, including some of the things that I've already spoken about, but I will go over the full list of other things in terms of gameplay additions as well. So in Galaxy, we get a brand new chapter, as well as new storybook content, which is great. I've mentioned soundtrack and assist already. Resolution differences, well, the new version, if you're running it on Switch 2, can hit 4K. That's nice, especially if you've got a 4K TV. In handheld, 1080p, but realistically, nothing huge there. So there's a couple of bits there, aren't there? If you are someone that likes to play in handheld, then this new version of Galaxy 1 may be actually preferable for you. Also, that new content and the assist mode if you have younger children. But it really looks that Galaxy 2 is where they've put the most effort in terms of new content. And look, I know people aren't happy with the price, but I've already been able to find a physical release of this for 48 quid, and I'm sure there'll be places where you can get it more cheaply. So if you are even considering it, I'd say physical is probably the way to go. So then jumping over to Mario Galaxy 2, and we get the same plethora of visual changes. Yes, the 4K resolution at 60 frames per second is really nice. If you're wondering about 120 Hertz, I haven't seen a 120 Hertz option come up. Usually what happens when I'm capturing on this card is if there is a game running at 120, it specifically requires me to change codec to something like ProRes to be able to capture that, and that hasn't happened here. So I'm thinking this is running at 60 FPS 4K on Switch 2 and native resolution 1080p on Switch 1. Now, we've already spoken about the motion controls. The same carries over to Galaxy 2. So if you're playing in handheld, you can control the motion still, which is great. You can detach the Joy-Cons and use them that way. There's a reset button there, and the same for playing docked. Realistically, two detached Joy-Cons is a better way of playing, in my opinion. It just feels better. But visually, yeah, you can see how nice the game is looking. There's a scene right at the start of Galaxy 2 where Princess Peach is in the hand of Bowser, and I think that gives us the clearest example of how good the character models are looking in this version. Now, whether or not they've done work on the textures and things like that, it obviously looks like they have, but then jumping from 480 to 4K, that's huge. What we can say is clearly it shows the quality of Nintendo's work, even back in the GameCube and Wii era, that by simply up-resing things, and a lot of the things clearly are just up-reses, they look this much better. I think the addition of the UI enhancements as well just bring the whole thing together. So yeah, you're not going to be disappointed when it comes to the visuals, even though it is such an old game. Especially when you consider that on Wii, I believe it was a 480p resolution, so it's quite the jump. I did mention the playlist for Galaxy 1. Across the games, you're looking at a 150 plus track playlist, which is great, but the extra content for Galaxy 2 is a little bit more. Now, while Galaxy has, I think it's one chapter added, I believe Galaxy 2 has multiple chapters, and that was taken from the Japanese eShop listing that states there are 4 chapters added for Galaxy. One thing I can't show you is Amibos support, but I can tell you about it. So Mario grants a life mushroom, while Rosalina grants a 1-up mushroom. Mario series amiibo grants coins, while other figures grant star bits. There are also 2 new figures coming out in April of 2026. Bit of a strange time to release those, I would say, unless we're getting something Mario Galaxy related in April or around March time, which also wouldn't surprise me. Something like Mario Galaxy 3, you would think would be a really easy 3D win for Nintendo. One thing I haven't mentioned, because it doesn't appear to be in the Switch 2 build just yet, is mouse mode support. There is mention of it on the Japanese website, I believe, and there's some note about it coming in a later patch, but right now mouse mode, as far as I can see, has no toggle and has no option, and if you just put the mode, or the Joy-Con rather, down on the table, it doesn't switch into mouse mode. What Glenn and I are going to do is bring you a full review that has the gameplay and things in it, but hopefully this will provide most of the information that you may need if you're considering picking them up. But as I've said at multiple times throughout the review, we all accept the price is ludicrous. Nintendo are having a laugh, but they are such good games. And I hadn't played the second one, so for me it's quite nice to play it in this best possible version, albeit with a tiny bit of drift when it comes to those gyro controls. Thank you to all of you that enjoy the content. Leave me any questions you have down below. If you are determined to buy these, you might as well save yourself 5% or get 5% in cash back over at switchup.gg, where you can get all your eShop credit delivered instantly, and we get the most minute kickback from Nintendo. Thank you to our Patreons and members. We've got a couple of new ones as well. Nice one. For all of you that enjoy the content, for all things Switch, all the time, keep it Switch up. Cheers, guys. See ya.